The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the parched earth of Dust Creek, a forgotten speck on the map where dreams went to die and men learned to live with disappointment. The year was 1875, and the small frontier town sat like a festering wound in the desert, populated by those too stubborn to leave and too broken to hope for better. Eleanor Harper pressed her worn cotton dress against her legs as another gust of hot wind kicked up dust devils in the main street. At 18, she possessed the kind of beauty that seemed out of place in such harsh surroundings. Auburn hair that caught fire in the sunlight, green eyes that held more depth than the shallow wells surrounding the town, and a grace that poverty hadn't yet managed to steal from her. "Ellie, get yourself back here, girl." Her father's voice cracked like a whip from their ramshackle homestead at the edge of town. Thomas Harper was a man defeated by life, his dreams of striking it rich in the silver mines long since buried under mounting debts and empty whiskey bottles. She turned reluctantly, knowing what awaited her. The past week had brought nothing but hushed conversations and her father's increasingly desperate demeanor. Something was brewing, something that made her stomach twist with unease. Their small adobe house squatted against the landscape like a tired animal. Inside, the sparse furnishings spoke of better times, a rocking chair that had belonged to her late mother, a cracked mirror hanging crooked on the wall, and a table scarred by years of use. Thomas Harper sat at that table now, his weathered face drawn tight with worry. "Sit down, Ellie," he said, not meeting her eyes. She remained standing. "What is it, Pa?" I've made arrangements." His hands trembled as he reached for the half-empty bottle beside him. "With Mr. Garrett." The name hit her like a physical blow. Josiah Garrett owned the largest ranch in the territory, a man whose wealth was matched only by his cruelty. Stories of his temper were whispered in the saloons, tales of ranch hands who disappeared, of horses beaten until they dropped. "What kind of arrangements?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "You're to be married next month." The words fell between them like stones. "It'll clear our debts. Save the farm." "No." The word erupted from her before she could stop it. "Pa, you can't." "It's done." He slammed his fist on the table, making the bottle jump. "You think I wanted this? You think I haven't lain awake every night since your ma died, trying to find another way?" His voice broke. "There is no other way, girl. It's this or we lose everything." "Then let us lose everything." Ellie's hands clenched into fists. "I'd rather starve than—" "You don't know what you're saying." Thomas finally looked at her, and she saw the defeat in his eyes. "You're young. You don't understand what it means to have nothing, to watch everything you've built crumble to dust." "I understand that you're selling me like cattle." "I'm saving you." He stood abruptly, swaying slightly. "Garrett will provide for you. You'll have fine dresses, a grand house, servants, and bruises to hide under those fine dresses." She'd heard the rumors about Garrett's previous wife, who'd died under mysterious circumstances. Her father's face flushed dark. "You watch your tongue, mister. Garrett is a respectable man." "Respectable men don't buy their wives to settle gambling debts." The silence that followed was deafening. Thomas Harper sank back into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 53 years. "A 1 month," he said quietly. "That's all the time he's giving us." Ellie turned and walked out without another word. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly in all directions, a prison without walls. She'd lived her whole life in Dust Creek, had never been further than the neighboring town for supplies. Now, that limited world was shrinking even more, closing in around her like a noose. She found herself walking toward the saloon. Not to enter respectable women didn't frequent such establishments, but to catch a glimpse of the world she was about to lose. The Broken Wheel Saloon sat at the heart of Dust Creek, its bat-wing doors constantly swinging as cowboys, miners, and drifters sought refuge from the heat and their troubles. A commotion near the saloon caught her attention. A crowd had gathered, forming a rough circle. Through gaps between the onlookers, she glimpsed two men facing each other in the street, hands hovering near their guns. "You cheated." Kane. One of the men, a local troublemaker named Pike, was red-faced and swaying. "Nobody's that lucky at cards." The other man stood perfectly still, his posture relaxed but ready, even from a distance. Ellie could see he was different from the usual rabble that passed through town, tall and lean, with dark hair that needed cutting and clothes that had seen better days. He carried himself with a dangerous grace. A tied-down holster rode low on his hip, marking him as a gunfighter. "I don't cheat," the stranger said, his voice carrying despite its quiet tone. "You're just a poor player when you're drunk." "Samuel Kane," someone near Ellie whispered. "Bounty hunter. They say he rode with Sherman during the war." Ellie found herself studying the man called Kane. His face was weathered but not old. She guessed him to be in his early 30s. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, and his gray eyes held a coldness that made her shiver despite the heat. Pike's hand twitched toward his gun. Kane's movement was so fast Ellie barely saw it. One moment, he was standing still. The next, his Colt was in his hand, pointed steadily at Pike's chest. "You sure you want to do this?" Kane asked, almost conversationally. "I've got no quarrel with you, but I'll finish it if you start it." The crowd held its collective breath. Pike's face had gone from red to white, sweat beading on his forehead, after what felt like an eternity. He slowly raised his hands. "This ain't over," he muttered, backing away. "It is unless you want to die," Kane replied, holstering his gun in one smooth motion. The crowd began to disperse, the excitement over. Ellie turned to leave but found herself caught by those gray eyes. For a brief moment, their gazes locked across the dusty street. Something passed between them, recognition of a kind, though they'd never met. Then he touched the brim of his hat in a gesture that might have been politeness or mockery, and disappeared into the saloon. Ellie hurried away, her heart beating faster than it should. She told herself it was the excitement of the near gunfight, nothing more, but she couldn't shake the feeling that those cold gray eyes had seen straight through to her soul. The next days passed in a blur of preparation and dread. Her father avoided her, drinking more heavily than usual. The few friends she had offered sympathy but no solutions. What could anyone do against a man like Garrett? She took to escaping to the river whenever possible. It wasn't much of a river, more a stream that ran stronger during the rare rains, but it was the only place in Dust Creek where she could find a moment's peace. The cottonwoods that grew along its banks provided shade, and the sound of water over rocks drowned out the world's harsh realities. It was there, 3 days after the confrontation in the street, that she encountered Samuel Kane again. She was washing clothes, her sleeves rolled up and her hair escaping from its pins, when she sensed someone watching her. She looked up to find him standing in the shade of a cottonwood, his horse grazing nearby. "Miss Harper," he said, touching his hat brim again. She stiffened. "How do you know my name?" "Small town. Word travels." He dismounted, moving with that same economical grace she'd noticed before. "Heard congratulations are in order." The words were neutral, but something in his tone made her flush. "I don't recall inviting conversation. Mr. Kane." "No, ma'am." He led his horse to the water's edge, letting it drink, just making polite conversation. "There's nothing polite about discussing a woman's circumstances with a stranger." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something flicker in those cold eyes. "You're right. My apologies." They stood in silence for a moment, the river gurgling between them. Ellie found herself studying him despite herself. Up close, she could see the lines that hard living had etched into his face, the way he held himself slightly favoring his left side. An old wound, perhaps. "Why are you here?" she asked finally. "Garrett hired me," he said simply. "Seems he's been having trouble with rustlers." Want someone to patrol his property until after the wedding. The words hit her like cold water. Even here, at her one refuge, Garrett's reach extended. I see. She gathered her washing, preparing to leave. Miss Harper. His voice stopped her. When she turned, he was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Sometimes the cage we see isn't the only option. Rivers find their way around obstacles. Before she could ask what he meant, he mounted his horse and rode away, leaving her standing knee-deep in the stream, her heart pounding with something that might have been hope or might have been fear. That night, as she lay in her narrow bed listening to her father's drunken snores, Ellie thought about cages and rivers and gray eyes that seemed to see too much. 1 month. She had 1 month before her life ended and her prison sentence began. Unless she could find a way to flow around the obstacles, like Cain had said. But what did a bounty hunter know about freedom? And why did she have the feeling that Samuel Cain might be as trapped as she was, just in a different kind of cage? The afternoon sun slanted through the cottonwoods, painting golden patches on the river's surface. Ellie had escaped again, seeking solace in the only place that still felt like hers. The water ran cool over her bare feet as she sat on a flat rock, her washing forgotten beside her. 3 weeks. 3 weeks until she became Mrs. Josiah Garrett. She'd tried everything, pleading with her father, seeking help from the town's minister, even considering running away. But where would she go? A young woman alone in the territories might face worse fates than marriage to a cruel man. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her tense. She grabbed her washing and stood, ready to flee, but relaxed slightly when she recognized the rider. Samuel Cain guided his horse through the shallows, his gray eyes scanning the area with practiced caution. Afternoon, Miss Harper. She nodded stiffly. Over the past week, their encounters at the river had become almost routine. He would water his horse while she did her washing, and they would exchange perhaps a dozen words. Yet, somehow, those brief meetings had become the highlight of her days. Mr. Cain. She returned to her washing, acutely aware of his presence. He dismounted, leading his horse to drink. Today, something seemed different about him. The usual cold distance in his expression had cracked slightly, revealing something raw underneath. Garrett's moving up the wedding, he said without preamble. 2 weeks from now instead of 3. The wet cloth slipped from Ellie's numb fingers. What? Why? He's got business in Tucson after that. Wants his new bride settled in before he leaves. Cain's jaw tightened. Man talks about you like your livestock he's purchased. Isn't that what I am? The bitterness in her voice surprised them both. Cain was quiet for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he sat on a boulder near the water's edge, his usual vigilant posture relaxing slightly. My wife used to come to a river like this, he said quietly. Back in Missouri, before the war. She'd wash clothes and sing, had a voice like a meadowlark. Ellie stilled. In all their brief encounters, he'd never spoken of anything personal. What happened to her? Bushwhackers. Came through while I was away fighting. His voice was flat, emotionless, but his hands clenched on his knees. Found her and our daughter by the river. They'd been... He stopped, shook his head. Been 10 years now. Thought I'd buried it deep enough, but being here, watching you... I'm sorry, Ellie whispered. Don't be. It's not your burden. He picked up a stone, skipped it across the water. Just saying I understand cages. Mine's made of memories instead of marriage vows, but it's a cage all the same. They sat in companionable silence, the river chattering between them. Ellie found herself studying his profile, the sharp angles softened by the afternoon light. The scar that spoke of violence survived. Why do you work for men like Garrett? She asked finally. Because hunting bounties pays well, and dead men don't require much conscience. He glanced at her. Because when you've got nothing left to lose, money's as good a reason as any to keep breathing. That's no way to live. Neither is marrying a man who'll break you just because he can. Their eyes met and held. Something electric passed between them, dangerous and undeniable. Ellie's heart hammered against her ribs. I should go, she said, but didn't move. Yes, he agreed, but didn't look away. The moment stretched taut between them until a splash downstream broke the spell. They both turned to see a young deer drinking, its spotted coat dappled by sunlight. It raised its head, water dripping from its muzzle, and bounded away. Used to hunt with my daughter, Kane said softly. She was too tender-hearted to shoot anything, but she loved tracking, could move through the forest quiet as a shadow. How old was she? 7. The single word carried the weight of all the years that should have followed. Ellie reached out instinctively, her hand covering his where it rested on the rock. He went very still, looking down at her small hand over his weathered one. Miss Harper. Ellie, she said, just Ellie. Ellie? Her name on his lips sent an unfamiliar warmth through her. This is dangerous territory we're walking into. I know. She didn't remove her hand. He turned his palm up, his fingers closing gently around hers. His hands were rough, calloused from years of handling guns and reins, but his touch was surprisingly gentle. I'm not a good man, he warned. I've done things that would horrify you, killed men for money, left families grieving, and I'm about to marry a monster to save a farm that's not worth saving, she interrupted. None of us are who we hope to be. He studied her face as if memorizing it. You're stronger than you know. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm drowning. Her voice broke slightly. Every night I dream of running, but there's nowhere to run to. And now, with the wedding moved up, his thumb brushed across her knuckles, the simple touch more intimate than anything she'd ever experienced. What if there was somewhere? What do you mean? He seemed to wrestle with himself before speaking. There's a town in Colorado, mining town called Silver Creek. A woman could disappear there. Start fresh. I've got money saved. Enough for passage and a start. Stop! She pulled her hand away, heat flooding her cheeks. What are you saying? I'm saying you have options besides Garrett. He stood abruptly, pacing to the water's edge. I'm saying I've watched too many good people get crushed by bad ones, and I'm tired of being the one who stands by and lets it happen. You barely know me. He turned back to her, his gray eyes blazing with an intensity that stole her breath. I know you sing when you think no one's listening. I know you leave food out for the stray cats behind the general store. I know you read the same 3 books over and over because they're all you have. I know you're kind to people who don't deserve it and brave enough to face down a future that terrifies you. He took a step closer. And I know that when I watch Garrett look at you like something he's bought, it makes me want to put a bullet between his eyes. The confession hung in the air between them, dangerous and electric. Ellie's pulse thundered in her ears. You're talking about running away, she whispered. I'm talking about living instead of just surviving. My father will drink himself to death with or without you there. His words were harsh, but not cruel. You can't save him, Ellie. You can only save yourself. She stood on shaking legs, overwhelmed by the sudden possibility of escape, but reality crashed back over her like cold water. Garrett would hunt us down. You know he would. Let him try. The dangerous edge in Kane's voice reminded her that this was a man who'd survived war and years of hunting other dangerous men. I can't, she said, though every fiber of her being screamed otherwise. I can't just... Samuel, what are you offering to help me run to come with me? I don't understand. He caught her shoulders gently, stilling her panicked words. I'm offering you a choice, that's all. A choice that doesn't end with you in Garrett's bed. Broken and... He cut himself off, jaw clenching. This close, she could see flecks of blue in his gray eyes, could smell leather and gunpowder and something uniquely him. Her hands came up to rest against his chest. feeling the steady beat of his heart under her palms. "Why?" she breathed. "Why do you care what happens to me?" His hands slid from her shoulders to cup her face, thumbs brushing her cheekbones with impossible tenderness. "Because you remind me that there's still beauty in this ugly world. Because when I see you here by the river, for a moment I remember what it felt like to hope for something better. Samuel. And because if I stand by and let him destroy you, I'll be past redemption. What's left of my soul won't survive it." The space between them evaporated. His lips brushed hers, gentle as a whispered prayer. Ellie had never been kissed before, had imagined it would happen on her wedding day with a man she despised. Instead, here by the river with the sun painting gold through the leaves, she tasted possibility on Samuel Kane's lips. The kiss deepened, his hands tangling in her hair, pins scattering. She gripped his shirt, anchoring herself as the world spun. Heat raced through her veins, unfamiliar and intoxicating. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I shouldn't have," he began. "Don't," she interrupted. "Don't apologize. Not for the first real thing I've felt in years." He rested his forehead against hers. 2 weeks. Think about Colorado. Ellie, think about freedom." The sound of horses approaching made them spring apart. Kane's hand went to his gun as 3 riders appeared through the cottonwoods. Ellie recognized them as Garrett's men, including his foreman, a brutal man named Thompson. Well, Thompson drawled, his pig-like eyes taking in Ellie's disheveled appearance and Kane's protective stance. "Mister, Garrett ain't gonna like hearing his bride-to-be is meeting men down by the river." "Miss Harper was doing her washing," Kane said coldly. "I was watering my horse. Nothing improper about 2 people using the same river." Thompson smirked. "Didn't look like nothing from where we're sitting. Looked like something Mr. Garrett would pay good money to know about." Kane moved so smoothly, Ellie barely saw it. Suddenly, he was beside Thompson's horse, his coat pressed against the man's thigh. "You could try telling him," he said conversationally. "Course, be hard to ride with a shattered leg. Harder still to prove anything when I tell him you've been skimming from the cattle sales." Thompson's face went white. "You don't know nothing about—" "I know everything that happens on land I'm paid to protect. Question is, do you want Garrett to know—" Kane stepped back, holstering his gun. "I'd think real careful about spreading tales. Thompson, real careful." The foreman glared, but backed his horse away. "Come on, boys. We got work to do." He shot one last look at Ellie. "You best get on home. Miss, your daddy's looking for you." They rode off, leaving dust and threat hanging in the air. Kane turned to Ellie, who stood trembling by the water's edge. "You should go," he said gently. "They're right about one thing. Being seen with me will only make things worse for you." "Will you be here tomorrow?" she asked. "Ellie, will you?" He studied her face, then nodded slowly. "If that's what you want." "It is." She gathered her washing with shaking hands. "Samuel, what you said about Colorado?" "The offer stands. Always." She nodded and hurried away, her lips still tingling from his kiss, her mind whirling with possibilities she'd never dared imagine. Behind her, Samuel Kane stood watching until she disappeared from view, his hand resting on his gun and his heart, long thought dead, beating with painful new life. That night, as Ellie lay in bed listening to her father's snores and the distant howl of coyotes, she touched her lips and remembered the taste of freedom, the promise of escape, the dangerous hope that had taken root in her chest. 2 weeks. She had 2 weeks to decide between the prison she knew and the unknown that Samuel Kane offered. 2 weeks to choose between safety and the wild possibility of love. Outside, the wind whispered through the cottonwoods, carrying the scent of the river and the promise of storms to come. The wedding preparations descended upon the Harper household like vultures on carrion. Seamstresses arrived from Tucson with bolts of white silk and lace. transforming their humble home into a workshop of Ellie's impending doom. Each fitting felt like another bar being added to her cage. "Stand still, girl," Mrs. Pemberton, the head seamstress, commanded through a mouthful of pins. "Mr. Garrett is paying good money for this dress." Ellie stood rigid on a wooden crate, arms extended like a scarecrow while the women fussed around her. The dress was beautiful, ivory silk with pearl buttons and delicate embroidery. It would have been a dream for any bride who actually wanted to be married. "You're lucky," Mrs. Pemberton continued, tugging at the bodice. "Most girls would kill for a husband like Mr. Garrett, all that wealth and property." "Yes," Ellie said flatly. "Lucky." Through the window, she caught a glimpse of Samuel Kane riding past. He'd been keeping his distance since their encounter by the river 3 days ago, but she felt his presence constantly. At night, she'd see the glow of his cigarette from where he kept watch near the property line. During the day, she'd catch glimpses of him conferring with Garrett's men, always professional, always distant. But she couldn't forget the taste of his kiss or the promise of Colorado. There, Mrs. Pemberton stepped back, admiring her work. "You'll be the prettiest bride Dust Creek has ever seen." "The prettiest prisoner," Ellie murmured. "What was that?" "Nothing. May I change now?" That evening, Josiah Garrett himself arrived for dinner. Ellie's father had sobered up enough to clean himself and put on his best shirt, though his hands still trembled. They sat at their small table while Garrett dominated the room with his presence. He was a large man, not fat but solid, with steel-gray hair and cold blue eyes. His clothes spoke of wealth: fine wool suit, gold watch chain, boots that had never seen real work. When he looked at Ellie, she felt like a horse being evaluated for purchase. "You've filled out nicely since I last saw you," he said, cutting into the roast she'd prepared. "Good breeding stock." Ellie's fork clattered against her plate. "Excuse me?" "Breeding stock," he repeated calmly. "I need sons to inherit my empire. My first wife was barren, useless. You're young, healthy. You'll give me the heirs I need." "Mr. Garrett," her father interjected weakly. "Perhaps such talk could wait." "Why?" Garrett fixed him with a stare that made Thomas Harper shrink in his chair. "She should understand her duties. I'm not paying off your debts for companionship. I can get that at any brothel." Ellie stood abruptly. "I need air." "Sit down." Garrett's voice cracked like a whip. "I didn't give you permission to leave." "I don't need your permission. Not yet." She met his gaze steadily, though her knees shook. "You'll own me in 10 days. Until then, I'll take air when I please." His face darkened. "You've got spirit." "That's good. Makes breaking them more satisfying." He smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. "My first wife had spirit too, at the beginning." Ellie fled the house, her father's weak protests fading behind her. She ran blindly through the darkness, past the chicken coop and the struggling vegetable garden, until she reached the old barn they used for storage. Inside, she collapsed against a hay bale, sobbing. "Easy there," she gasped, spinning around. Samuel stepped from the shadows, his face concerned in the moonlight filtering through gaps in the boards. "How did you—" "Saw you run. Figured you might need—" He held out a flask. "Medicinal purposes." She took it gratefully, coughing as the whiskey burned down her throat. "He's a monster." "Yes. He talks about me like I'm a broodmare." "That's how men like him see women." Samuel sat beside her on the hay, careful to leave space between them. "As property, things to be used. Is that how you see women?" "No." He took the flask back, sipping slowly. "I was raised by a strong woman. My mother ran our farm alone after my father died, taught me that strength comes in different forms." "What would she think of you now?" "A bounty hunter working for men like Garrett." He was quiet for a long moment. She'd be disappointed, but she's been dead 8 years, so her opinion doesn't matter much anymore. They sat in companionable silence, passing the flask between them. Outside, coyotes called to each other across the desert. "Tell me about Colorado," Ellie said finally. "Silver Creek sits high in the mountains, snow in winter, wildflowers in summer. The mining company always needs workers, cooks, laundresses, teachers for the miners' children. A woman could make an honest living there. And you, what would you do? There's always work for men who are good with guns. Security for the mines, protecting shipments." He glanced at her. "Or maybe I'd try something different, buy a little land, run some cattle. Been a long time since I built anything instead of destroying it." "That sounds nice." She leaned back, studying the stars through a hole in the roof. "A little house in the mountains. Maybe a garden. Children playing in the yard." She felt him tense beside her. "Ellie." "I know." She turned to face him. "You're not offering marriage. I understand that. But whatever you're offering has to be better than what waits for me in that house. You deserve better than a broken-down gunfighter with blood on his hands." "And you deserve better than the ghosts you carry." She reached for his hand. "Maybe we could help each other heal." He squeezed her fingers gently. "When did you get so wise?" "About the same time I realized I had 10 days left to live." She meant it as a joke, but the words came out bitter. Samuel turned her face toward his. "You're not going to die, one way or another. I won't let him have you." "You can't kill him. They'd hang you." "There are other ways." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "Trust me, Ellie, please." Before she could respond, the barn door burst open. Thompson stood silhouetted against the night, 2 men flanking him. Well, Mr. Garrett's gonna be real interested to hear about this." Samuel was on his feet instantly, hand hovering near his gun. "Back off, Thompson." "Don't think so." Thompson's smile was ugly. "See, Mr. Garrett just doubled the finder's fee for information about his bride. Reckon catching her rolling in the hay with the hired help ought to be worth plenty." "We weren't," Ellie began. "Don't matter what you were or weren't doing, Missy. Matters what it looks like." Thompson stepped forward. "Now, you can come quiet-like, or we can do this the hard way." Samuel moved to block him. "She's not going anywhere with you. 3 against 1. Cain, you that fast. Want to find out?" The tension crackled like lightning before a storm. Ellie's heart hammered as hands drifted toward weapons. Then, unexpectedly, Samuel relaxed. "You're right, Thompson. 3 against 1 isn't good odds." He smiled coldly. "That's why I poisoned your whiskey supply this afternoon." Thompson's face went white. "You're lying." "Am I that bottle you and the boys were passing around earlier? How's your stomach feeling? Little crampy mouth dry?" One of Thompson's men doubled over, retching. The foreman's hand went to his belly, sweat beading on his forehead. "Relax," Samuel said conversationally. "It's just syrup of ipecac. You'll be puking your guts out for a few hours, but you'll live. Unless..." He pulled a small bottle from his pocket. "You want the antidote?" "Give it here." Thompson lunged forward but stopped as Samuel held the bottle over a hay bale. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to forget you saw anything tonight. You're going to tell Garrett that Miss Harper was in her room all evening, tending to wedding preparations, and you're going to stay away from her until the wedding. He'll kill us if he finds out. Then you'd better make sure he doesn't find out." Samuel tossed the bottle to Thompson, who caught it desperately. "That's enough for all 3 of you. Now get out." The men fled, Thompson shooting one last venomous look over his shoulder. When they were gone, Ellie sank back onto the hay, shaking. "Did you really poison them?" "Just enough ipecac to make them miserable. They'll be fine by morning, but they won't risk crossing me again." He knelt beside her. "Are you all right?" "No." She laughed, a slightly hysterical edge to it. No, I'm not all right. Everything is falling apart. In 10 days I'll belong to that monster, and we're hiding in a barn like criminals. And I'm so scared I can barely breathe. He gathered her into his arms, and she buried her face against his chest, inhaling the scent of leather and sage. His heart beat steady under her cheek. Listen to me, he said softly. 5 days from now, there's a supply wagon heading to Fort Grant. The driver owes me a favor. He'll hide you in the back, take you as far as Tucson. From there, you can catch a stage to Colorado. I'll follow in a few weeks, after things die down. 5 days. She pulled back to look at him. But the wedding. We'll be missing a bride. His eyes were fierce. I've got enough money saved to set you up proper. Respectable boarding house. Enough to live on until you find work. Samuel, I can't take your money. It's blood money anyway. At least this way it does some good. She touched his face, tracing the scar. What about my father? He made his choices. You don't have to burn with him. Garrett will hunt for me. Let him. By the time he realizes you're gone, you'll have enough of a head start. And if he comes after you... Samuel's expression turned lethal. Well, hunting works both ways. Hope bloomed in her chest. Fragile but real. 5 days. 5 days. He sealed the promise with a kiss, deeper than their first, full of desperation and desire. Her hands tangled in his hair as he pressed her back against the hay, his body a warm weight above hers. Ellie, he breathed against her throat. God, what you do to me. Show me, she whispered, surprising herself with her boldness. Show me what it's supposed to feel like. Please, if I have to leave everything behind, I want one good memory to take with me. He pulled back, searching her face. You don't know what you're asking. I know I want something that's mine to give, not his to take. She drew him down for another kiss. Please, Samuel, let me choose this. At least... His resistance crumbled, with gentle hands and whispered endearments. He showed her tenderness she hadn't known existed, in the hay-scented darkness, with stars peering through the roof. Ellie discovered that desire could be a gift rather than a weapon, that surrender could mean freedom rather than defeat. Later, they lay entwined, her head on his chest, his fingers combing through her unbound hair. No regrets, he asked softly. None. She traced patterns on his chest. For the first time in my life, I chose something for myself. 5 days, he reminded her. Can you pretend that long? I'll pretend for a lifetime if it means freedom at the end. They dressed reluctantly, knowing she needed to return before her absence was discovered. At the barn door, he caught her for one last kiss. Be careful, he warned. Garrett's smarter than he looks. Don't give him any reason to suspect. I won't. She touched his face one last time. 5 days. She slipped through the darkness toward the house, where lamplight still glowed in the windows. Behind her. Samuel watched until she was safe inside, his hand resting on his gun and plans spinning through his mind. 5 days to save her. 5 days to resurrect the man he used to be, the one who protected instead of hunted. 5 days until Eleanor Harper either found freedom or they both found death. The night sky erupted in flames. Ellie woke to the acrid smell of smoke and the sound of men shouting. Through her window, she could see their barn, where just 2 nights ago she'd found hope in Samuel's arms consumed by fire. Raiders! Someone screamed. Get the guns! Chaos erupted as the thunder of hoofbeats surrounded the homestead. Ellie threw on her robe and rushed from her room, nearly colliding with her father in the narrow hallway. Get back inside. Thomas Harper fumbled with his old rifle, hands shaking from fear and drink. Lock your door. Pa, what's happening? Comancheros, maybe Apache raiders. Don't matter, just hide. A window shattered in the front room. Ellie screamed as a figure crashed through, but instead of a raider, It was Samuel Kane, his clothes singed and gun drawn. "We need to go now." He grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the back door. "I can't leave my father. He'll be fine. It's you they're after." Samuel's face was grim in the firelight. "This isn't a random raid. Garrett's behind this." "What, that's insane." Another window exploded. Bullets splintered the door frame inches from Ellie's head. Samuel shoved her to the floor, covering her body with his as he returned fire. "Garrett hired these men," he said between shots. "Probably told them to make it look like a raid, burn the evidence. With you dead, he keeps the land without the inconvenience of marriage." "But we're getting married in 3 days." "Exactly. Why split profits with a wife when you can have a tragic victim?" Samuel hauled her to her feet. "Move!" They burst through the back door into chaos. The barn was fully engulfed now. Flames leaping to the chicken coop. Men on horseback circled like wolves, firing at anything that moved. In the confusion, Ellie saw Thompson directing riders, confirming Samuel's suspicions. "This way?" Samuel led her toward the corral where his horse waited, trained to come at his whistle. They'd made it halfway when a rider spotted them. "There's the girl, get her!" Samuel spun, firing with deadly accuracy. The rider toppled from his saddle. Another came from the left, and Samuel's second shot sent him reeling, but more kept coming. "Too many," he muttered. "Change of plans." He pulled Ellie toward the rocky outcropping behind the homestead, natural cover where they could make a stand. Bullets whined past like angry hornets. Ellie's bare feet bled on the rough ground, but terror drove her forward. They dove behind the rocks as gunfire erupted around them. Samuel checked his ammunition, face grim. 6 shots left, not enough. "Samuel, listen to me." He gripped her shoulders. "When I start shooting, you run for the river, follow it north to the mission ruins. Hide there until... I'm not leaving you." "Ellie, please." "No." She grabbed his revolver from his holster, surprising them both. "My mother taught me to shoot before she died. I'm staying." Before he could protest, riders crested the rise. Ellie fired, the gun bucking in her hands. Her shot went wide but forced the men to scatter. Samuel stared at her with something like awe before turning to face their attackers. They fought side by side, making every shot count. The raiders, expecting easy prey, found themselves facing determined resistance. Bodies littered the ground, and the attack began to falter. Then Ellie heard her father scream. She turned to see Thomas Harper dragged from the house, Thompson's gun pressed to his head. "Drop the guns! Kane!" Thompson shouted, "or I paint the ground with her daddy's brains." "Pa," Ellie started forward, but Samuel caught her. "It's a trap," he hissed. "That's my father." "Kane, you got 5 seconds." Samuel's jaw clenched. Slowly, he set down his gun and raised his hands. "Let him go. Thompson, your quarrel's with me." "Wrong. My orders are to clean up Garrett's mess." Thompson grinned, starting with the drunk. "No!" Ellie lunged forward as Thompson pulled the trigger. The shot echoed across the desert. Thomas Harper crumpled, a dark stain spreading across his chest. Ellie's scream tore from her throat as she dropped beside her father. "Papa, please." Thomas grabbed her hand weakly, blood bubbling on his lips. "My fault," he wheezed. "All my fault. Should have protected you better. Don't talk. Save your strength. Listen." His grip tightened with desperate strength. "Your mother, she loved you so much. Be strong like her. Be free." His eyes found Samuel. You keep her safe." "I will," Samuel promised. Thomas Harper smiled, a peaceful expression crossing his weathered face. "Margaret," he whispered. "Been so long." His hand went limp in Ellie's. She sobbed, cradling her father's body as the world burned around them. "Touching," Thompson said, Now for the main event. Samuel moved faster than lightning. He rolled, scooped up his fallen gun, and fired in one smooth motion. Thompson's weapon flew from his hand. A second shot sent him stumbling backward, clutching his shoulder. "Fall back," Thompson screamed to his remaining men. "Fall back." The raiders retreated in disarray. Their easy victory turned to costly defeat. Samuel kept his gun trained on them until the hoofbeats faded into distance. Only then did he kneel beside Ellie, who still held her father's cooling body. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "He's gone." Her voice sounded hollow, disconnected. "He wasn't a good father, but he was all I had left." "That's not true." Samuel gently pried her away from the corpse. "You have yourself. You have your future. And if you'll let me, you have me." She looked at him through tear-blurred eyes. "Why didn't they kill us?" "They lost too many men. Thompson's wounded. They'll regroup. Come back with more fighters." He helped her stand. "We can't stay here." Ellie looked around at the devastation. The barn was collapsed embers. The house smoldered. Half the roof gone. Bodies of raiders and horses dotted the yard. Everything she'd ever known lay in ruins. "There's nothing left," she whispered. "No, there's everything left." Samuel cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You're alive. You're free. Garrett showed his hand tonight, attempted murder. No one will force you to marry him now. He'll say it was raiders. Who'll believe us? The territorial marshal in Tucson will. I've worked with him before. He's an honest man." Samuel glanced at the lightning sky. "But we need evidence. Help me search the bodies." They found what they needed on Thompson, a letter in Garrett's handwriting outlining the plan. "Make it look like raiders. Leave no witnesses. Bring the girl's body as proof." Fool kept it as insurance. Samuel muttered. Probably planned to blackmail Garrett later. Ellie stared at the letter, rage building in her chest. "He killed my father for money, destroyed everything for greed." That's what men like Garrett do. They take and take until there's nothing left. Samuel pocketed the evidence. But this time, he loses. They wrapped Thomas Harper's body in a blanket and laid him beside the ruins of the house. Ellie said a prayer while Samuel kept watch, guns reloaded. As the sun rose over the devastation, Ellie felt something shift inside her. The frightened girl who'd washed clothes by the river was gone, burned away with everything else. In her place stood someone harder, someone who'd seen the worst men could do and survived it. "What now?" she asked. "Now we get you somewhere safe. Then I pay Garrett a visit." "No." She met his surprised look steadily. "We pay him a visit, together." "Ellie." "He killed my father, destroyed my home, tried to have me murdered." Her hand found the gun at her side, comfortable now with its weight. "I'm done being the victim in this story." Samuel studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, together. But first, we need allies. The marshal, maybe some of the townspeople who've suffered under Garrett. Mrs. Morrison at the general store. Her husband died working Garrett's mine, and Doc Hartley Garrett ruined him when he wouldn't lie about his first wife's death." Ellie's mind raced. There are others, people too scared to speak before, but maybe now. "Smart girl." Samuel smiled grimly. "Garrett thinks he's won. He's about to learn different." They salvaged what they could from the ruins' ammunition. Her mother's photograph. A little money hidden in a tin. Samuel's horse had survived, smart enough to flee the fire. They mounted together, Ellie sitting in front, Samuel's arms protective around her. As they rode away from the smoking ruins, Ellie looked back one last time. Her childhood lay in those ashes, along with her innocence and her father. But from those ashes, something new was rising. "No more running," she said quietly. "No more running," Samuel agreed. "Time to fight." The sun climbed higher, revealing the full devastation of the night. But it also illuminated the road ahead. leading not to escape, but to justice. Josiah Garrett had made a fatal mistake. He'd tried to kill Eleanor Harper. Instead, he'd created something far more dangerous, a woman with nothing left to lose and vengeance in her heart. Thunder rumbled in the distance, promising storms. But Ellie no longer feared the storm. She was becoming one herself, and God help anyone who stood in her path. The little town of Dust Creek appeared on the horizon, unaware that its day of reckoning was approaching on horseback. Samuel's arms tightened around her as if sensing her thoughts. "Whatever happens next," he said quietly, "we face it together." "Together," she echoed, her hand covering his on the reins. Behind them, smoke still rose from the Harper homestead. Ahead, destiny waited with bated breath, and somewhere in his grand house, Josiah Garrett sat counting his profits, unaware that his carefully laid plans had just birthed his doom. The girl was supposed to die in the fire. Instead, she'd been forged by it, tempered like steel in the flames. And now she was coming for him, with justice as her companion and vengeance as her guide. The transformation was complete. Eleanor Harper, the frightened girl by the river, was dead. In her place rode Ellie Kane, for she'd taken Samuel's name in her heart, if not in law, a woman who would reshape the destiny of Dust Creek with gunpowder and determination. The storm was coming, and she would be its herald. The abandoned mission of San Rafael stood like a ghost against the desert sky, its adobe walls crumbling but still offering shelter. Samuel had chosen well close enough to town to strike, far enough to avoid immediate detection. They'd spent the day there, planning and preparing, while Ellie grappled with the weight of her father's death and her thirst for justice. As darkness fell, Samuel sat cleaning his guns by firelight while Ellie stared into the flames, reliving the previous night's horrors. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "I can handle Garrett alone. He killed my father." Her voice was steady, harder than he'd ever heard it. "I have every right to face him." Rights and wisdom aren't always the same thing. She turned to him, firelight dancing in her green eyes. "Were you wise when you hunted the men who killed your family?" Samuel's hand stilled on the revolver. "No, I was half mad with grief and rage. Killed 8 men before the fever broke. When it was over, they were still dead, and I was hollowed out, empty. But you survived." "Surviving isn't living. Ellie, took me 10 years to learn that." He set the gun aside, moving to sit beside her. 10 years of drifting, killing for money, becoming the very thing I'd hunted. Don't follow my path." "I'm not you." She leaned against his shoulder. "But I can't just let him win, not after everything." They sat in silence, listening to coyotes howl in the distance. Finally, Samuel spoke again, his voice thick with emotion. "I never told you the whole truth about my family." Ellie looked up at him, waiting. "My daughter, Rebecca, she was—" His voice caught. "She was just like you, stubborn, brave, full of fire. Used to argue with me something fierce about wanting to learn to shoot. I always said she was too young, too gentle." He laughed bitterly. Maybe if I'd taught her, she could have defended herself when those animals came. "Samuel. My wife, Mary, she was the practical one. Kept us all grounded. She'd bake bread every Sunday, and the smell would fill the house. Rebecca would help, getting flour everywhere, laughing." He rubbed his eyes. "I can barely remember their faces anymore. Just fragments, the sound of their laughter, the way Mary hummed while she worked. How Rebecca's hand felt so small in mine." Ellie took his hand, intertwining their fingers. "Tell me more about them." So he did, for the first time in 10 years. Samuel Kane spoke of his dead, painting pictures with words of a life destroyed by violence. He told her about Rebecca's favorite doll, hand-sewn by Mary, about the songs they'd sing around the piano in the evenings, about plans for a bigger house, more children, a future that would never be. "The worst part," he said as the fire burned low, is that I became like them, the killers. Oh, I told myself it was different. I had a badge sometimes, or a bounty warrant. But dead is dead, and I left families grieving just like mine. You're not like them, Ellie said firmly. You have conscience, remorse. You're trying to save me, not hurt me. Am I? Or am I just using you to feel alive again? He pulled away, standing to pace. What kind of man pursues a girl half his age, promised to another what kind of man? A man who sees me. Ellie rose, intercepting his restless movement. Not a possession or a problem to solve, but a person. You're the first one who ever asked what I wanted. And what do you want? Ellie really want, now that everything's burned away? She considered carefully. I want to stop being afraid. I want Garrett to answer for his crimes. I want to build something new from the ashes. She touched his face. And I want to do it with you, if you'll have me. You deserve better. Stop. She pressed her fingers to his lips. Stop deciding what I deserve. That's my choice, not yours. And I choose you. Samuel Kane, broken parts and all. He caught her hand, pressing it to his chest where his heart beat strong and steady. You humble me. Good. You could use some humbling. She managed a small smile. Now, are we going to sit here feeling sorry for ourselves? Or are we going to make Garrett pay? Despite everything, Samuel found himself smiling back. There's my fighter. All right, let's review the plan. They'd spent the afternoon gathering intelligence. Doc Hartley had confirmed Thompson survived, but was laid up with a shoulder wound. More importantly, he'd revealed that Garrett was nervous, had hired extra guards. The whole town was buzzing about the raid on the Harper place. He's spreading the story that Apache hit your farm, Samuel explained. Says he's heartbroken about your father, devastated that his bride-to-be is missing, probably taken captive. While he sits in his mansion counting the blood money. Not for much longer. Tomorrow's Sunday. Garrett never misses church, likes to play the respectable citizen. That's when we make our move. In church, Ellie was shocked. That's exactly where he won't expect it. And with the whole town watching, he can't silence us easily. Samuel's smile was sharp. Besides, what better place for confession? They went over the plan again. Each detail crucial. Ellie would enter first, veiled as if in mourning. Samuel would position himself by the back door. When the moment was right, they'd confront Garrett with the evidence, forcing him to face his crimes before the entire congregation. And if he runs, he won't. Pride won't let him. He'll try to brazen it out, and that's when we spring the trap. Samuel pulled out a wanted poster. See, Garrett's not the respectable businessman he pretends. Before he came here, he was James Garrison, wanted in Kansas for land fraud and murder. I recognized him months ago, but kept quiet, waiting for the right moment. Ellie stared at the poster. The artist's rendering was clearly Garrett. Years younger, but unmistakable. You've known all along. Part of why I took his job. Wanted to gather evidence, build a case. Your situation just moved up my timeline. He refolded the poster. Between this and Thompson's letter, we've got him. Unless he kills us first. Possible, but in front of the whole town, even Garrett's not that bold. Samuel checked his guns again. A ritual Ellie was learning meant he was worried. Still, if shooting starts, you hit the floor and stay down. Samuel, promise me. She saw the fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. This man who'd faced death countless times was terrified of losing her. I promise, she said softly. But the same goes for you. No heroic last stands. A deal. They sealed it with a kiss that tasted of promises and gunpowder. Hope and fear intertwined. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. We should rest, Samuel said roughly. Big day tomorrow. They made their beds on opposite sides of the fire. Propriety maintained even in their isolation. But in the darkness, Ellie heard him shifting restlessly. Can't sleep either, she whispered. Keep thinking about Rebecca. She'd be about your age now, if she'd lived. His voice was barely audible. Keep wondering what kind of woman she'd have become. Ellie rose and moved to his bedroll, sliding in beside him. He stiffened, but didn't pull away. She'd have been strong, Ellie said softly. Brave like her father, kind like her mother. She'd have made you proud. Samuel's arm came around her, holding her close. How do you know? Because that's what love does. It shapes us, even after it's gone. She pressed her ear to his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Your family's love shaped you. My mother's love shaped me. We carry them with us always. When did you get so wise? He echoed his earlier question, but now it held wonder rather than sadness. Yesterday, she answered honestly. When I watched my father die and realized that even flawed love leaves its mark. He wasn't a good father, but he loved my mother. And through her, he loved me. In the end, that's what mattered. They lay in silence, finding comfort in shared warmth and understanding. Eventually, exhaustion claimed them both, carrying them into dreams where the dead smiled and blessed their cause. Dawn came too soon, bringing with it the day of reckoning. They rose, prepared carefully. Ellie dressed in her mother's black funeral dress, saved all these years. The veil would hide her face until the right moment. Samuel wore his best clothes, guns hidden but ready. You look beautiful, he said, then caught himself. I know what you mean. She managed a smile despite her nerves. You clean up pretty well yourself. They shared a simple breakfast, neither having much appetite. As they prepared to leave, Samuel caught her hands. Whatever happens today, I want you to know something. He struggled for words. This man more comfortable with actions than speeches. You brought me back to life, Ellie Harper. These past weeks, I've felt more human than I have in 10 years. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. She squeezed his hands. We're going to win. Garrett's going to pay. And then we're going to build that life in Colorado you promised me. Is that what you want, Colorado? I want wherever you are. She stood on tiptoe to kiss him. But yes, mountains sound nice. And that garden, maybe some chickens. Chickens, he laughed, despite everything. All right, chickens it is. They mounted his horse, Ellie riding side saddle in front of him, the proper grieving lady returning to town. As they approached Dust Creek, church bells began to ring, calling the faithful to worship. Ready? Samuel asked. Ready. The streets were busy with families heading to church. Some recognized Samuel, nodding respectfully. Others stared at the veiled woman with him, whispers starting already. By the time they reached the church, half the town knew something was afoot. Samuel helped her dismount, his hands lingering on her waist. Remember, wait for my signal. Be careful, she whispered. Always am. He touched the brim of his hat and melted into the crowd gathering outside. Ellie climbed the church steps on trembling legs. Inside, she could hear the congregation singing, their voices raised in a hymn about justice and redemption. How appropriate. She paused at the door, gathering courage. Somewhere in that church sat the man who'd destroyed her life, playing the righteous citizen while her father's blood still stained the ground. But also in that church were good people, people who deserved the truth. The singing ended. Reverend Michaels began to speak, his voice carrying through the door. Now was the moment. Eleanor Harper was dead, burned away with her home. But Ellie, just Ellie now, belonging to no man, defined by her own choices, was very much alive. And she had work to do. She pushed open the church doors and stepped inside, ready to resurrect herself and bury Josiah Garrett with the truth. The reckoning had come to Dust Creek, dressed in mourning clothes and armed with evidence, and nothing would ever be the same. The heavy church doors creaked as Ellie stepped inside. every head turning at the interruption. Gasps rippled through the congregation as they recognized the black mourning dress, the veiled figure they'd assumed was dead or captive. Josiah Garrett sat in his usual front pew, dressed in his finest suit, playing the concerned citizen. His face went white as parchment when he saw her. Eleanor, Reverend Michaels, stepped forward from the pulpit. "Child, we thought the Apache—" "There were no Apache." Ellie's voice rang clear through the sanctuary as she lifted her veil. "Only hired killers sent by the man who sits before you pretending to worship." The church erupted in shocked murmurs. Garrett surged to his feet, face flushing red. The girl's clearly traumatized, the loss of her father. "Yes, let's talk about my father." Ellie walked down the aisle, each step deliberate. "Shot down in cold blood by Thompson on your orders. Mr. Garrett, or should I say, Mr. Garrison." The name hit him like a physical blow. Several townspeople who'd done business in Kansas straightened, recognition dawning. "This is outrageous," Garrett blustered. "Reverend, remove this hysterical woman." "I have proof." Ellie pulled out Thompson's letter, holding it high. "Written in your hand, detailing exactly how to make my murder look like a raid. How much did you pay them? 30 pieces of silver?" Samuel appeared at the back door, blocking it as 2 of Garrett's men tried to leave. "Nobody goes anywhere until the ladies finish speaking." Doc Hartley stood up in his pew. "I treated Thompson last night. He confirmed everything before the morphine took hold. Garrett ordered the attack." "Lies." Garrett's composed mask was cracking. "You're all conspiring against me." "Like you conspired against your first wife, Mrs." Morrison rose, trembling but determined. "We all knew Martha didn't fall down those stairs. She was trying to leave you. And my husband didn't die in a mine accident," another woman added. "He was organizing the workers, wanting better conditions. Then suddenly a tunnel collapsed right where he was working." One by one, people stood, voicing suspicions they'd harbored for years. Garrett backed toward the altar, his remaining men uncertain, outnumbered. "You have no legal proof," he snarled. "No court would convict." "Actually," a new voice spoke from the side entrance, "they would." Marshal John Hawkins stepped inside, his badge gleaming. 2 deputies flanking him. Samuel had sent word, and the lawmen had ridden through the night from Tucson. "James Garrison," the marshal said formally, "you're under arrest for fraud, murder and attempted murder. We've been looking for you for 5 years." "This is preposterous." Garrett reached inside his coat. Several things happened at once. His hand emerged with a derringer. Samuel drew and fired in one motion, the bullet striking Garrett's weapon, sending it spinning. Ellie dropped to the floor as promised. Women screamed. Men ducked behind pews. Garrett clutched his bleeding hand, rage distorting his features. "You think you've won? I own this town, I own the law." "Not anymore." Marshal Hawkins stepped forward, iron shackles ready. "Your reign's over, Garrison." But Garrett wasn't finished. With his good hand, he grabbed a heavy candlestick from the altar and swung it at the marshal's head. Hawkins ducked, but the motion left him off balance. That's when Thompson appeared in the vestry doorway, his arm in a sling but a gun in his good hand. "Nobody move." Samuel started to turn, but Thompson was already aiming at him. "Drop it, Kane, or I'll—" A shot rang out. Thompson staggered, looking down in shock at the spreading red stain on his chest. Behind him, Ellie stood with her mother's old pistol, the one she'd hidden in her mourning dress, smoke curling from its barrel. "That's for my father," she said quietly as Thompson collapsed. The church fell silent, everyone frozen in tableau. Then Garrett laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "So the lamb has teeth after all." He pressed his bleeding hand to his chest, staining his white shirt crimson. "Tell me, Miss Harper, How does it feel, taking a life crossing that line? Ellie met his gaze steadily. Like justice. Justice, Garrett sneered, even as the deputies cuffed him. You've killed a man in a church. You're no better than you. Samuel moved to Ellie's side, his presence steady and protective. Thompson was about to shoot an officer of the law. She saved lives. Marshal Hawkins nodded. Clear case of defense. Won't even go to trial. He gestured to his deputies. Get Garrison out of here. We've got a date with a judge in Tucson. As they dragged Garrett toward the door, he twisted to look back at Ellie. This isn't over. I have lawyers. Influence. You have nothing. Ellie stepped forward, her voice strong. Your money can't buy you out of this. Too many witnesses. Too much evidence. You're going to hang for what you've done. We'll see about that. But the bravado was hollow now, fear creeping into his eyes as reality set in. After they removed him, the church slowly came back to life. People approached Ellie, offering condolences for her father. Thanks for her courage. Women who'd lived in fear of Garrett for years wept with relief. Reverend Michaels cleared his throat. Perhaps we should continue the service. I think we all need some prayer after all this. Actually, Reverend, Samuel stepped forward. If you don't mind, there's something else needs doing. He turned to Ellie, and to everyone's shock, dropped to one knee. Eleanor Harper, I know this isn't the time or place, but I've learned life's too short and uncertain to wait for perfect moments. Ellie's hand flew to her mouth. Samuel, I've been dead inside for 10 years. You brought me back to life. You showed me that even someone as broken as me could find redemption. He pulled out a simple gold band, his mother's, kept all these years. I don't have much to offer. Just a gun, a horse, and a heart that's yours if you'll have it. Will you marry me? Tears streamed down Ellie's face. Around them, the congregation held its breath. Even Mrs. Morrison, the town's worst gossip, was struck silent. Yes, Ellie whispered, then louder. Yes. The church erupted in applause as Samuel slipped the ring on her finger and rose to kiss her. It was highly improper, scandalous even, but after everything that had happened, propriety seemed a small concern. Well, Reverend Michaels said, a smile tugging at his stern features. I suppose we could make this a wedding instead of just a service, if you're willing. Ellie looked at Samuel, seeing her future in his eyes. No grand dress, no elaborate ceremony, just truth and love and the promise of something real. We're willing, she said. And so, in a church still echoing with violence, where blood had been spilled and justice served. Eleanor Harper married Samuel Kane. The townspeople stood as witnesses, some crying, some smiling, all understanding they were seeing something profound, the end of one story and the beginning of another. Doc Hartley gave the bride away, having known her since birth. Mrs. Morrison played the organ, only hitting a few wrong notes in her excitement. The vows were simple, traditional, but carried weight after all they'd endured. Do you, Samuel, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, till death do you part? I do. His voice was rough with emotion, his eyes never leaving hers. Do you, Eleanor, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, till death do you part? I do. No hesitation, no doubt. This was her choice, freely made. Then by the power vested in me by God in the territory of Arizona, I pronounce you man and wife. Reverend Michaels smiled. You may kiss your bride. This kiss was different from their others witnessed, blessed, legal. When they parted, Ellie saw tears on Samuel's scarred face. This hardened gunfighter undone by a simple ceremony. I love you, He whispered, just for her, "I love you too," she replied, meaning it with every fiber of her being. As they turned to face the congregation, Marshal Hawkins approached. "Congratulations, both of you. Kane, there's a reward for Garrison's capture. $5,000. Enough for a real fresh start." Samuel looked at Ellie, who nodded. "We'll take it. Planning to head to Colorado. Start that ranch we talked about." "Good land up there," the marshal agreed. "And Ellie misses. Kane, what you did today took courage. Your father would be proud." She thought of Thomas Harper, flawed but ultimately loving, who died trying to protect her. "I hope so." As they walked down the aisle together, man and wife, the congregation pelted them with rice someone had found in the vestry. Outside, the sun shone bright on Dust Creek, as if the town itself was waking from a long nightmare. "So, Mrs. Kane," Samuel said as he helped her onto his horse. "Ready for that adventure?" "More than ready." She settled against him as he swung up behind her. "Though I should warn you, I meant what I said about those chickens." He laughed, the sound free and genuine. "Chickens it is, and cattle. Maybe some horses. We'll build something good. Ellie, something clean." "Together," she said, covering his hands with hers on the reins. "Together," he agreed. As they rode out of Dust Creek, neither looked back. The past lay behind them, graves and ghosts, violence and sorrow. Ahead waited Colorado mountains, the promise of snow and wildflowers, of honest work and peaceful nights. Thompson's body would be buried in an unmarked grave. Garrett would hang 3 months later, his lawyers unable to overcome the mountain of evidence and testimony. The town would slowly heal, new businesses replacing those built on blood money. But that was the future. For now, there was just the rhythm of hoofbeats, the warmth of two hearts beating as one, and the vast Arizona sky stretching endlessly toward tomorrow. The girl who'd washed by the river was gone. The woman who dispensed justice in a church rode on, and somewhere between who she'd been and who she was becoming, Ellie Kane found herself whole. The past was ashes, the future was unwritten, and the present was perfect, her and Samuel and the open road, riding toward their happily ever after with guns on their hips and hope in their hearts. The journey to Colorado should have taken 2 weeks. Instead, it nearly ended at the river where everything began. They'd been riding hard for 3 days since leaving Dust Creek, switching horses at way stations, always looking over their shoulders. The wedding ring on Ellie's finger still felt foreign, wonderful but strange. Samuel had been tense since they'd received word that some of Garrett's men had escaped the marshal's net. "We'll rest here tonight," Samuel said as they approached the familiar cottonwoods along the river. The same spot where they'd first truly seen each other seemed fitting for a brief respite. Ellie dismounted, stretching tired muscles. The water looked inviting after days of dust and heat. "Remember when you found me here?" "Changed everything," he admitted, checking his rifle from habit. "I was just existing until that day." She smiled, moving toward the water's edge. That's when she saw the blood. "Samuel!" Her scream came just as gunfire erupted from the trees. Samuel spun, pushing her behind a boulder as bullets whined overhead. "Stay down!" He returned fire, his shots precise but outnumbered. 5 men emerged from cover Garrett's remaining gun hands, led by a scarred man named Coulter who'd been absent during the church confrontation. "Thought you'd gotten away clean, did you?" Coulter called out. "Mister, Garrett had friends, rich friends who don't like their business disrupted." Samuel checked his ammunition grimly. 6 shots in his Colt, 8 in the rifle. "Not enough." What do you want, Coulter?" "The girl. Garrett's buyers still want their merchandise. You can walk away. Kane, this ain't your fight anymore." "Like hell." Samuel's voice was deadly calm. "She's my wife." "Then you can die together." The firefight was brutal. Samuel fought with desperate precision, making every shot count. Ellie used her pistol when men got too close, her hands steady despite her terror. But there were too many, and they were closing in. A bullet caught Samuel in the shoulder, spinning him back. Another grazed his leg. He kept fighting, but Ellie could see him weakening, blood soaking his shirt. "Run!" he gasped between shots. "Get to the horses!" "No." She dragged him behind better cover as bullets chipped stone around them. "We stay together." "Ellie, please." "Till death do us part. Remember," she reloaded with shaking fingers. "I meant it." Coulter's men were advancing, confident now. Samuel slumped against the rock, his gun hand trembling. They were out of options, out of miracles. Then Ellie remembered something. The old Apache trail Samuel had mentioned, barely visible through the cottonwoods. It led to higher ground, better position. "Can you move?" "I can try." Supporting his weight, she half-dragged him toward the trail. Coulter's men saw the movement and charged. Samuel turned, firing his last rounds to buy them time. 2 men fell, but 3 kept coming. They stumbled up the trail. Samuel's breathing labored, leaving a blood trail. Behind them, boots crashed through brush. Ahead, the trail ended at a sheer drop to the river below. "Trapped," Samuel said with bitter humor. "Sorry, darling. Seems I failed you after all." "You haven't failed anything." Ellie helped him sit, then checked her pistol. 2 shots left. She stood between him and the approaching danger, chin raised. "They'll have to go through me." "Ellie, no." "My choice." Coulter appeared first, gun drawn, smiling coldly. "Touching. The little bird protecting her wounded hawk. Step aside. Girl, you're worth more alive." "I'm worth nothing to men like you." She aimed her pistol at his chest. "And I'm nobody's merchandise." 2 bullets left by my count. 3 of us. You can't win." "Maybe not." She shifted her aim to the water barrel strapped to his horse, their drinking supply for crossing the desert. "But I can make sure you don't win either." Coulter's smile faded. Without water, the desert would kill them as surely as bullets. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me." The standoff stretched taut. Samuel struggled to rise behind her, managing to prop himself against a boulder. His rifle lay beside him, empty but still a threat if they didn't know that. "Seems we have a problem," Coulter said finally. "Seems we do." Ellie's arm didn't waver. That's when they heard it, hoofbeats. Lots of them. Coulter's men shifted nervously as a dust cloud approached from the east. "Boss," one muttered. "That's too many riders." Marshal Hawkins crested the ridge with a full posse, badges glinting in the afternoon sun. He'd been tracking them, making sure they got clear of the territory safely. "Drop your weapons," the marshal commanded. "You're surrounded." Coulter cursed viciously, but knew he was beaten. One by one. The gunmen laid down their arms. The marshal's deputies moved in, efficient and professional. Ellie didn't lower her gun until the last man was in irons. Only then did she turn to Samuel, who'd gone dangerously pale. "Doc," she screamed, "we need help." The posse had brought a field surgeon. Anticipating trouble, he worked quickly, extracting bullets and binding wounds while Ellie held Samuel's hand, whispering prayers and promises. "Will he live?" she asked when the doctor finished. "If infection doesn't set in, he needs rest, proper care." The doctor looked around at their wilderness surroundings. "There's a town about 10 miles north. Fort Salvation has a good doctor. Clean beds." Ellie nodded, stroking Samuel's fevered face. He was unconscious now, the blood loss and shock taking their toll. Marshal Hawkins approached, his weathered face kind. "We'll escort you there. Ma'am, make sure you arrive safe." "Thank you." She looked at Coulter, bound and glaring. "What about them?" "They'll hang beside their boss. Attempted murder of a woman is still a capital crime in this territory." The marshal studied her with respect. You did well, holding them off. Your husband trained you. My mother, actually, but Samuel gave me the courage to use it. She kissed her husband's forehead gently. He gave me everything. They fashioned a travois for Samuel, making the journey to Fort Salvation slowly. Ellie rode beside him, never leaving his side, talking constantly to keep him anchored to life. She told him about their future ranch, describing every detail. The house they'd build, log walls and real glass windows, the garden she'd plant, vegetables and flowers mixing practically with beauty, the children they'd raise, teaching them to be strong and kind, the life they'd create from love and determination. By the time they reached Fort Salvation, Samuel's fever had broken. He managed to open his eyes as they carried him into the doctor's house. Ellie, his voice was weak but aware. I'm here. She gripped his hand. You're going to be fine. The men. Arrested. It's over. Samuel, we're safe. He smiled faintly. Told you, you were stronger than you knew. We're stronger together, she corrected. The doctor in Fort Salvation was young but competent, trained back east. He cleaned and stitched Samuel's wounds properly, dosing him with laudanum for the pain. He's lucky, the doctor told Ellie. Another hour and he'd have bled out. You saved his life keeping pressure on those wounds. He's saved mine more times than I can count. For 3 days, Samuel drifted in and out of consciousness while fever raged. Ellie never left his bedside, bathing his face with cool water, spooning broth between his lips, talking endlessly about their plans. On the 4th day, he woke fully, his gray eyes clear. Hey there, Mrs. Kane, he said weakly. Hey yourself. Tears of relief streamed down her face. You scared me. Sorry, didn't mean to ruin the honeymoon. She laughed through her tears. Some honeymoon, getting shot at, nearly dying. Still better than my first wedding. That had my mother-in-law singing. He squeezed her hand. How long? 4 days. The doctor says you'll make a full recovery if you rest. Rest? He made a face. Never been good at that. Well, you'll learn. She smoothed his hair back. I'll make sure of it. Marshal Hawkins visited that afternoon, hat in hand. Wanted to check on you both before I headed back. Coulter and his boys are secured, awaiting transport. Thank you, Samuel managed. For everything. Just doing my job. The marshal smiled. Though I admit, it's nice when the job means helping good people for a change. He set a packet on the bedside table. Reward money for Coulter's gang. Another 3,000. Figure you folks earned it. After he left, Ellie counted their funds. Between the rewards and Samuel's savings, they had enough for a good start in Colorado. More than enough. We could buy extra land, she mused. Maybe hire some hands to help with the cattle. Already planning our empire, Samuel teased. Our home, she corrected. Our future. They stayed in Fort Salvation another week while Samuel regained his strength. The townspeople, hearing their story, treated them like heroes. Women brought food. Men offered advice about Colorado. Children peeked shyly at the famous gunfighter and his brave bride. Finally, the doctor declared Samuel fit to travel, though he warned against anything strenuous. Define strenuous, Samuel said, loading his rifle one-handed. Samuel Kane, you're not fighting anyone for at least a month. Ellie scolded. Yes, ma'am. But he was smiling as he said it. They left Fort Salvation on a crisp morning, autumn beginning to paint the leaves. Samuel rode carefully, still healing, but his color was good and his spirits better. How far to Colorado? Ellie asked. Week, maybe less if the weather holds. He glanced at her, eager to start that garden, eager to stop running. She guided her horse closer to his. To just be. I know the feeling. He reached over, taking her hand. Been running so long I'd forgotten what home felt like. You reminded me. They rode in comfortable silence, the landscape gradually changing from desert to grassland. Mountains appeared on the horizon, purple-blue and crowned with snow. There, Samuel pointed. Colorado, our future. Ellie stared at the mountains, feeling something loosen in her chest. All her life, she'd been trapped by circumstance, by others' decisions. Now, finally, she was free to choose her own path. It's beautiful, she breathed. It's home, Samuel corrected. Or will be, once we make it ours. That night, camping under stars that seemed brighter away from any town, they lay entwined despite his healing wounds, not with passion that would wait for full recovery, but with deep contentment. I love you, Ellie said into the darkness. I don't think I've said it enough. You've shown it. His arms tightened around her. Every day, in 100 ways. That matters more than words. Still, I love you, Samuel Kane, for seeing me, saving me, letting me save you in return. He was quiet so long she thought he'd fallen asleep. Then, soft as a prayer, you're my redemption, Ellie, my proof that God gives second chances. I'll spend whatever years I have left trying to deserve you. You already do, she assured him, just by being you. They fell asleep to the sound of night birds and distant coyotes, the stars wheeling overhead in their ancient patterns. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the hard work of building a life from scratch. But tonight, they had each other. They had survival against all odds. They had love forged in fire and tested by blood. And they had hope, that most precious commodity in the West, burning bright as the campfire that held back the darkness. The river where it all began was far behind them now. Ahead lay mountains and promise, a future written by their own hands. Together, they would make it beautiful. The mountain valley spread before them like a promise kept. Silver Creek nestled between protective peaks, smoke rising from chimneys, the sound of hammers and saws speaking of growth and possibility. After weeks of travel, they'd finally arrived at their destination. There it is, Samuel said, reining in his horse. Our new beginning. Ellie studied the mining town below. It was larger than Dust Creek, more prosperous, with proper buildings and even a small school. It's perfect. They'd stopped first at the land office, where Samuel purchased 40 acres along Crystal River, 5 miles from town. Good bottomland for farming, with timber for building and fresh water year-round. The clerk, a cheerful man named Peterson, had been encouraging. Fine piece of property, he'd said. Previous owner went back east. Too much work for him, but you folks look capable. Now, standing on their own land for the first time, Ellie felt overwhelmed. Theirs. No one could take it away. No one could force them off. After a lifetime of uncertainty, the solid ground beneath her feet felt like a miracle. Where do we start? She asked. Samuel dismounted carefully, still favoring his wounded shoulder. First, we need shelter. There's an old cabin here somewhere, according to Peterson. They found it near the river, more shed than house, but with solid walls and a good roof. Inside, dust motes danced in afternoon sunlight streaming through cracked windows. A simple table, 2 chairs, and a rope bed frame were all that remained of the previous occupants. It's not much, Samuel said apologetically. It's ours, Ellie corrected, already envisioning improvements. That's all that matters. They spent the first week cleaning and repairing, working side by side in comfortable rhythm. Samuel taught her carpentry skills while she showed him tricks for stretching supplies and making a house feel like home. Every evening, exhausted but content, they'd sit by their fire planning the future. We'll add rooms as we need them, Samuel said, sketching on a piece of bark. Kitchen garden here, barn there, maybe a workshop for winter projects. And children's rooms, Ellie added softly, when the time comes. He looked up, something vulnerable in his eyes. You still want that after everything? more than ever. She took his hand. I want to fill this house with laughter. Samuel, chase away all the ghosts with new life. Winter arrived early that year, October snow blanketing their valley in pristine white. They'd managed to stock supplies, repair the cabin's gaps, and lay in firewood. As the first blizzard howled outside, they huddled together, safe and warm. Different from Arizona, Ellie observed, watching snow swirl past the window. Having second thoughts. Never. She snuggled closer. Though those chickens I wanted might have to wait for spring. Samuel chuckled, the sound still new enough to make her heart lift. He laughed more now, smiled easier. The constant vigilance that had defined him was slowly relaxing, though he still wore his gun and checked the perimeter each night. The townspeople of Silver Creek proved welcoming, unlike Dust Creek's suspicious nature. This was a community built by newcomers, everyone understanding the courage it took to start over. The general store owner, Mrs. Chen, a Chinese immigrant with perfect English and a keen business sense, extended credit without question. Pay when you can, she said. Good people are worth investing in. Ellie found work doing laundry for the miners. Hard labor, but honest pay. Samuel hired out for security work occasionally, but spent most days improving their property. By December, they'd added a lean-to kitchen and started planning the barn. It was 2 days before Christmas when the past caught up with them. Ellie was alone, Samuel having gone to town for supplies. When she heard horses approaching, she looked out to see 3 riders, travel-worn and grim. Her blood chilled when she recognized the lead man Garrett's lawyer, Cornelius Blackwood. She met them at the door, rifle in hand. You're not welcome here. Mrs. Kane. Blackwood tipped his hat mockingly. Or should I say, Miss Harper, your marriage isn't exactly legal, considering it was performed under duress after you murdered a man. Self-defense. The marshal confirmed it. Ah, yes, Marshal Hawkins. Sadly, he's been removed from office. Corruption charges. His testimonies are now questionable. Ellie's grip tightened on the rifle. What do you want? Mister, Garrett's associates have invested heavily in certain ventures. Your actions cost them significantly. They want compensation. Garrett was a murderer and a fraud. Allegedly, he died before trial, so legally he was innocent. Blackwood smiled coldly. You, however, confessed to killing Thompson in front of witnesses. Without Hawkins's protection, that's murder. Get off my land. Certainly, but we'll be back, with proper warrants this time. He leaned forward in his saddle. Enjoy your Christmas, Mrs. Kane. It may be your last as a free woman. They rode away, leaving Ellie shaking. When Samuel returned an hour later, he found her sitting at the table, rifle across her lap, tears streaming down her face. What happened? He was beside her instantly. She told him everything. Samuel's expression grew darker with each word. They can't make those charges stick, he said finally. Too many witnesses saw what really happened. Witnesses who are hundreds of miles away, and with Hawkins gone. She looked up at him desperately. I thought we were free. We are, his voice turned hard. And we're staying that way. But the threat lingered, poisoning their Christmas. They went through the motions a small tree. Simple gifts, a special meal, but joy felt forced. On Christmas night, as snow fell softly outside, they held each other close. Maybe we should run again, Ellie whispered. Further west, maybe California. No, Samuel's arms tightened around her. No more running. This is our home. We stand and fight. How they have lawyers, money, influence. And we have truth, plus something they don't expect. He smiled grimly. I sent telegrams after Blackwood left, called in old markers. We're not facing this alone. 3 days later, his words proved prophetic. Riders appeared again, but this time Ellie recognized the lead figure, John Hawkins, no longer a marshal but still wearing his integrity like armor. Heard you folks were having trouble, he said, dismounting. Behind him rode 6 others, hard-faced men who moved like soldiers. Samuel greeted each warmly, old comrades from the war, bounty hunters he'd ridden with, men who owed him their lives. Blackwood's bringing a bought judge and hired guns, Hawkins explained over coffee. Plans to take you back for a show trial. But he's about to learn Colorado folks don't take kindly to outsider justice. They had 3 days to prepare. Samuel coordinated defenses while Ellie rallied the townspeople. To her surprise, many stepped forward. You folks are good neighbors. Mrs., Chen said simply. We protect our own here. The miners, rough men who understood injustice, offered support. The minister, a former Confederate chaplain who'd found peace in the mountains, promised to witness any proceedings. Even the banker, usually concerned only with profits, recognized the threat outside corruption posed to their community. When Blackwood returned with his entourage, a dozen gunmen and a snake of a judge named Harlan, he found not 2 isolated settlers but an entire town standing firm. This is illegal assembly. Judge Harlan declared from his carriage, disperse immediately or face charges. Only illegal assembly here is yours. The Silver Creek mayor, Thomas Brightwater, stepped forward. This is Colorado territory, not your personal fiefdom. I have warrants. From a jurisdiction with no authority here. You want to arrest our citizens. You go through proper channels. Brightwater, a former attorney himself, smiled coldly. Of course, that would mean a real trial. With real evidence, which I doubt you want. Blackwood's face flushed. Stand aside, or we'll... You'll what? Samuel emerged from the crowd, flanked by his war comrades. Start a fight with the whole town. Your hired gun's good enough for those odds. The gunmen shifted nervously. Fighting 2 people was one thing. Fighting an entire armed community was suicide. Judge Harlan tried another approach. Good people, you're being misled. This woman is a murderess. This woman, Ellie interrupted, stepping forward, defended herself and others against criminals. Everyone here knows the truth. Your lies have no power here. The truth, Blackwood laughed harshly. The truth is you cost powerful men significant money. That debt must be paid. Then send them my regards. Samuel said calmly, tell them Samuel Kane says to come collect personally. I'll be waiting. The name rippled through the hired guns. Samuel Kane's reputation had weight, even here. Several men reconsidered their employment options. The standoff stretched taut. Then, unexpected salvation arrived in the form of a federal marshal's detail. Riding hard from Denver, the lead marshal, a stern woman named Catherine Pike, surveyed the scene with disgust. Judge Harlan, she said coldly. You're under arrest for corruption, bribery, and falsifying federal documents. Mr. Blackwood, you're wanted for questioning in several fraud cases. The tables turned instantly. Harlan blustered. Blackwood threatened, but federal authority was absolute. As Marshal Pike's men took them into custody, she approached Samuel and Ellie. Former Marshal Hawkins sent word. She explained. Been investigating Garrett's network for months. Your situation gave us the opening we needed. She tipped her hat. Thank you for standing firm. Too many folks cave to pressure like this. We had help, Ellie said, looking at the townspeople still surrounding them. Good neighbors make all the difference. As the federal detail left with their prisoners, the town erupted in celebration. The threat was over. Truly over this time. Garrett's network would crumble without Blackwood's legal manipulations and Harlan's corrupt influence. That night, the town threw an impromptu party in the saloon. Samuel, usually avoiding crowds, endured the backslapping and toasts with grace. Ellie danced with miners and merchants alike, her joy infectious. Never seen anything like it, Hawkins told Samuel over whiskey. Whole town standing up like that. You found something special here. Yes, Samuel agreed, watching Ellie laugh at something Mrs. Chen said, "We have—" Later, walking home through falling snow, Ellie took his arm. That was terrifying. But we won. Together. She stopped, making him face her. Samuel, I don't want to just survive anymore. I want to live, really live. Build that life we dreamed about. He kissed her there in the street, snow catching in their hair. Then let's do it. No more looking over our shoulders. No more waiting for the next threat. Just us and our future. Spring came early that year, as if nature itself celebrated their freedom. They planted the garden Ellie had envisioned, built the barn Samuel designed. Neighbors helped raise the walls, a community tradition that bonded them even closer to Silver Creek. By summer, their cabin had grown into a proper house. The chickens Ellie wanted pecked in the yard. Cattle grazed in the meadow. Samuel had even started breeding horses, discovering a talent for gentling wild mustangs. In August, Ellie stood by the river, their river now watching Samuel work with a young colt. He moved differently these days, the constant tension replaced by quiet confidence. The guns still hung by the door, but dust gathered on them. "You look content," she called. He glanced up, smiling in a way that still made her heart skip. "I am content. First time in my life I can say that." She touched her still flat belly, where new life grew. She hadn't told him yet, waiting for the right moment. Tonight, she decided, over dinner, she'd share the news that their family was growing. A year ago, she'd been a frightened girl washing by a river, trapped in a life she didn't choose. Now she was a woman who'd faced down killers and corruption, who'd chosen her own path and fought for it. The girl who'd lost her innocence beneath rough hands was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, Ellie Kane, wife, partner, and soon, mother. The transformation was complete, forged in fire and tempered by love. As she walked back to their house, their home, she saw the young cottonwood they'd planted by the porch. It had survived winter, growing strong and straight. Like them, it had put down roots in sometimes harsh soil. Like them, it would endure. "Coming in for lunch," she called to Samuel. "Be right there," he answered, giving the colt a final pat. She paused on the porch, looking out over their land. Mountains rose majestically behind. The river sang its eternal song, and somewhere in the distance, an eagle cried freedom into the vast Colorado sky. This was their happy ending, earned through blood and courage, loss and determination. Not an ending, really, but a beginning of the life they'd chosen, the love they'd fought for, the future they'd build together. The West had tested them with its harsh truths. They'd survived, and more, they'd triumphed. Now, in this valley between the mountains, they would write the rest of their story in seasons of planting and harvest, in children's laughter and quiet evenings, in all the small moments that make a life worth living. The river still flowed, constant and eternal. But now it sang of hope instead of sorrow, of promises kept instead of innocence lost. And Ellie Kane, standing on the porch of her hard-won home, smiled and went inside to prepare lunch for the man she loved. Their real story was just beginning. Thank you so much for listening to this tale of love, courage, and redemption in the Old West. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss what this story meant to you. If you enjoyed this journey with Ellie and Samuel, please subscribe to Wild West Night, like this video, and hit the hype button to help more people discover these stories of the American frontier. Your support means everything and helps keep these tales alive. Until next time, partners.